Welcome to the Travis on Sports podcast, where I'll be discussing the latest news throughout the sports world. As always, I'm your host, Travis Tyler, a freelance sports writer, blogger, and just an overall sports junkie who loves to talk about sports. Today is Monday, November 22nd, 2021. On today's show, I'll talk about some interesting developments in the MLB free agent market. The Mets have a new general manager. Odell Beckham Jr. has a new team. A fight broke out in the NBA over the weekend. There are more rumors of college football playoff expansion. The USFL is making a comeback. I'll give my thoughts on the college basketball season after the first couple of weeks. There are some NFL contract extensions and some more NCAA football coaching news. MLB Free Agency opened shortly after the World Series. The market may have to move rather quickly with a lockout looming at the beginning of December, but some teams may wait to make the right move since there isn't a lot of structure for how to handle this situation. But so far, the St. Louis Cardinals re-signed reliever TJ McFarland to a one-year, $2.5 million contract. The Dodgers signed pitcher Andrew Heaney to a one-year, $8.5 million contract. Not really sure why they were interested in him unless they wanted him to possibly find a home in the bullpen because he did not pitch very well as a starter last season. The Yankees have re-signed pitcher Joely Rodriguez, and the Rockies have re-signed pitcher Jhoulys Chacin. Braves signed former Brewers catcher Manny Pena to a two-year, $8 million deal. I would think that's to be the backup catcher since they already have Travis d'Arnaud there, but he also split time the starting catcher in Milwaukee and had solid production from behind the plate. Former Red Sox pitcher Eduardo Rodriguez signed a 5-year, $77 million contract with the Tigers. With that deal, the Tigers are really betting on the upside of a guy who's still pretty young yet has a veteran presence and has shown promise in most of his seasons. He wins games, he strikes people out, and he throws pretty hard. What he needs to cut back on are the walks and really needs to bring his ERA down, as is usually well above 4. But hopefully that works out there for him. Former Mets star pitcher Noah Cindergard has signed a one-year deal with the Angels worth $21 million. By name recognition, star power, whatever you want to call it, you would have thought Cindergard would get a bigger deal, but you got to remember he's returning from Tommy John surgery, missed most of last season, came back towards the end, but he had several setbacks along the way, and likely that's a prove-it deal, a bridge deal to prove he's still the pitcher that's worth that bigger contract and get that bigger contract next offseason. Blue Jays pitcher Jose Berrios and Rays shortstop Wander Franco have signed major contract extensions. Franco gets 12 years, $223 million, with $185 million of that guaranteed, and Berrios gets 7 years and $131 million. Elsewhere, Justin Verlander has re-signed with the Houston Astros. Again, he's another pitcher coming off of Tommy John surgery, so while he did recently hold a bullpen that had a lot of teams watching him, maybe he felt like he needed to sign that one-year deal and prove that he still has it as he's getting older, although he said he wants to pitch till he is 45, I believe it was. I'm a little disappointed that the Tigers didn't get him back this time, but maybe next time around, who knows. Giants kept first baseman Brandon Belt and pitcher Anthony DeSclafani. The Angels added pitcher Aaron Loop, and the Brewers signed catcher Pedro Severino. In trade news, the Tigers acquired Reds catcher Tucker Barnhart for prospect Nick Quintana. The move adds a veteran backstop who has had a pretty successful MLB career to a team that needed help developing the young pitching staff with a veteran presence as a catcher. And a guy who knows the MLB also adds depth to a unit that really just had Eric Haas and Jake Rogers last year, with Jake Rogers coming off an injury and his availability a little murky, a little unknown going into this year, and Barnhart has a better batting average than those two, although Haas hit 22 homers last year. Rays traded infielder Mike Brousseau to the Brewers for a minor league pitcher. Brousseau is a young player, spent a little bit of time in the majors, and had a really successful 2020, but did not play very well in 2021 with, I believe his average was 187. So that might be a case of a little change of scenery, hoping the Brewers can at least get him to be a utility guy in a National League that, with the pitchers hitting and needing pinch hitters, it's a little more important to have guys on the bench there. The Rays also traded right-handed pitcher Louis Head to the Marlins for a player to be named later. In MLB front office news, the Mets have named Billy Epler their next general manager. Epler has signed a 4-year deal to take the position after spending 2015 to 2020 as the general manager for the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. And Epler was fired by LA after the 2020 season and briefly joined the William Morris Endeavor Sports Agency as a member of their baseball division. Before he was hired by the Angels, he spent time with the Yankees organization as the assistant general manager for 3 years, and earlier in his career spent time as a scout for both the Rockies and the Yankees. He's now tasked with turning around a team that underachieved a lot last season, especially in the second half when they fell apart, and will be without one of their star pitchers, Noah Cindergard, and likely shortstop, second baseman, wherever you want to put him, Javier Baez. Odell Beckham Jr. was granted his release from the Cleveland Browns and went unclaimed on waivers. He has since signed with the LA Rams after rumors that primarily involved the Packers, Chiefs, and Saints, but other teams were among some possible suitors as well. Did not work out well in Cleveland. He was unhappy with his role, couldn't stay healthy, and couldn't stay on the field to develop the role that he honestly wanted. But in LA, if they can keep him happy, healthy, his emotions in check, keep his outbursts in check, he adds even more horsepower to that incredible offense. The only real question I would have for the Rams is how long can you make that last, because you have very little draft capital over the next few years and a roster full of many veteran players. Yeah, some of them are still young enough, but eventually holes are going to start popping up. How quickly do those holes pop up, and how are they able to fill them? Beckham so far has played 1 game for the Rams and caught 2 passes for 18 yards. In the NBA on Sunday night, a fight broke out in the Pistons-Lakers game stemming from a foul line box out. In an attempt to go up for the rebound, Lakers forward LeBron James can be seen punching Pistons center Isaiah Stewart in the face. Stewart retaliates by going after LeBron and impressively fighting through every teammate, coach, security guard that tries to stop him. And if you look at the video, the punch that LeBron throws certainly appears to be intentional, even though he said it was on accident. And Stewart can be seen after chasing after LeBron, being dragged away from the scene with blood covering his eye and going to the locker room. Since then, LeBron has been suspended 1 game and Stewart has been suspended for 2. I can't say the punishments are unfair. They certainly seem pretty fair, especially since Stewart escalated things. I like the fight from him, but he could have contained himself a little bit more and shown some maturity, but it was still good to see that he wasn't going to take crap from anybody. I'm honestly a little surprised the league actually stepped up to suspend LeBron, who's been the face of their league for 18 years, and that they weren't harsher on Stewart for going after the golden child, if you will. And as a Pistons fan, you gotta love seeing the mentality come out in Stewart. He did take it a little far and did escalate things a little bit too far, but he showed a lot of the fight and resilience that the Bad Boys and the Ben Wallace in the early 2000s Pistons showed, and he's a guy that people won't want to mess with in the league after that. He's shown his toughness and he's earned some respect. Switching gears to the college football landscape, for a couple years now, people have called for amendments, expansion, changes, whatever you want to call it, to the college football playoff. Earlier this year, back in the summer, there was an expansion proposal brought forth to expand the field to 12 teams. Now there appears to be a new proposal, which is really the same proposal with a little bit of tweaking. It's still the basic 12-team expansion idea, but the new proposal would grant automatic bids to the Power 5 conference champions. So you would have the Big 10, Big 12, ACC, SEC, and Pac-12 champions all automatically in, and then allows an automatic bid to the highest ranked Group of 5 champion. But what is probably going to hold this up is the Group of 5 commissioners won't be happy that they're only going to get one team in really from this, especially when do the math. If it's the Power 5 champions and one of the Group of 5 champions, then there will be 6 more Power 5 teams likely in that field, and that's just not fair representation. I can totally see the argument that the Group of 5 commissioners would have, and unfortunately they're not likely to win that argument because of the power that the Power 5 teams and conferences have over them, especially with many of the best teams in the Group of 5 going into and joining Power 5 conferences within the next few years. And that could ultimately be the holdup in an expansion, and eventually, and this is just an opinion here, I've heard of several other people mention this is a possibility before as well, it could lead to the Group of 5 and the Power 5 splitting even further to where the Group of 5 is another separate division pretty much between the FBS and FCS level and has its own playoff field. And that would possibly even stem back to the recommendation from the Knight Commission about NCAA reforms. So it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. I wouldn't expect any of the Group of 5 commissioners to vote for it. The USFL is making a comeback. It was announced earlier this week that the popular 1980s Spring Football League, which met its demise by trying to compete with the NFL in the fall after 3 successful springs, will be returning with 8 of its original franchises in April of 2022 to play a 10-game schedule run by Fox Sports. The league will include the Michigan Panthers, the Houston Gamblers, the New Orleans Breakers, Tampa Bay Bandits, Birmingham Stallions, Pittsburgh Maulers, Philadelphia Stars, and New Jersey Generals. Those names will pretty much just have nostalgic significance because the teams will be playing in a centralized neutral location yet to be determined. College basketball season has started, and I'm going to give a few of my thoughts as far. I mean, these are obviously going to change throughout the year as teams get hot, teams get cold. As the season progresses on, I mean, we're only 2 weeks in. Most teams have played 4 or 5 games. So there's not a ton to go off of, but I will give you some observations of mine from what I've seen so far. A lot of teams could be argued as the best in the nation. You got Gonzaga and UCLA up at the top. I think Purdue is just as good as them, and actually Gonzaga and UCLA are going to play tomorrow night. I think Purdue is just as good as them. They've proven that the gap's closed. Gonzaga playing at an unstoppable level. But for the Boilermakers, Purdue, they've beaten North Carolina rather handily and a very convincing win over a top 10 team in Villanova. Speaking of the North Carolina team, I might get some flack from North Carolina fans for this, but I don't think they're as good as most others think. Yeah, they have the talent, but Hubert Davis is his first year as a head coach. He's never been a head coach anywhere else, but he was an outstanding player and an outstanding analyst on TV, but he's only ever been an assistant at any level, so that gives me some doubt. Plus, they've already dropped out of the poll. I mean, you can obviously it fluctuates. You can go back in and out.